Moving on to our second session of the day then. While every organisation is unique, we can continuously better ourselves by learning from peers and the organisations around us, as I just said. And, in an effort to reduce the duplication of time, money and effort within the sector, and emphasise the benefits of reusing recipes for service delivery, CAST have developed the Service Recipes platform. This platform collects practical examples to help charities reuse and learn from one another's digital services. And Chris Thorpe, Head of Technology at CAST, is here with Alessandra Canella, Head of Service Design at FutureGov, and Olivia Holbrook, Service Designer at Snook, to share how you can make service recipes that work for your charity and achieve greater impact for your service users. All three speakers will be joining us after the session to have a live Q&A. So if you want to submit a question, you can hit the Q&A button at the bottom. It looks like two text boxes overlapping, and you can submit one to us. Enjoy.
Hello everyone, welcome to our session, Recipes for Success for Digital Service Delivery. We're going to talk to you a bit about a piece of work that's been done as a collaboration for the Catalyst between CAST, FutureGov and Snook. And so presenting to you today are myself from CAST, Ale from FutureGov and Olivia from Snook. And I'm going to hand off to Ale first, who is going to tell you a tiny bit about what the Service Recipe platform is about.
What is it then? So the Service Recipe platform collects practical examples to help charities reuse and learn from one another digital services. We know every charity is different, is unique, as you would like to say, it's better to say, but at the same time, every charity has got similar challenges. So if you think about it, similar charities might have like similar services. So like if you think about it, booking a thing, booking a person, booking a location, paying for something, offering something online, offering a session, having to make decisions. These are all things that charities are trying to work out individually, but in the reality, they're delivering pretty much the same thing. So we thought, why don't we build a platform where charities can share what they've been working on, so their recipes, for others to learn from. We call these examples recipes. The recipes really work as recipe normally works, so they've got ingredients and they've got steps. And you, as a charity, might want to implement them exactly as they are in the textbook. So follow everything step by step for straightforward implementation, or you might want to like just take bits of it to rethink your own services. What is usually a service recipe? A service recipe is, it has a specific focus on a service, more likely a bit of the service that delivers an interesting service proposition. So tries to deliver an interesting value for the end user. That can be a resident, citizen or beneficiary, the way we want to talk about it, or internal staff as well. It can be interesting because of how it's using tools, existing tools from Twilio to Facebook to Airtable, and is always thinking about keeping the user like in the first place, so designing for the user. All the recipes have like different bits to it. So every recipe has got like a summary, user needs statement, software and tools used, implementation steps, guidance on what works well, risks to consider, and point of contact. So we really wanted to get to the bottom of what is the charities need to know in order to deliver exactly the same thing. So in this case, we see like the We Are With You example, that is about providing group support sessions online. And we currently have 22 recipes contributed by 15 organizations. What we like to call these recipes, even though somebody else would call them a guideline or case studies, because we really want to help charities implement them, get to like a better, enhanced, different service delivery. It's really like the metaphor of the fridge. So you've got the recipe in your textbook and you have to check the ingredients that are there in your fridge and say, okay, the recipe says I've got ginger and it's got tomato. I love this combination. I'm actually going to do it exactly this way because it matches my taste. Or I don't have ginger, or I don't like tomato, therefore I'm going to actually not use these two and just change a little bit the recipe. The idea is exactly the same based on your contextual the organizational context you're trying to design for, you're going to take the recipes and use them to design for your organization, for your service. It's just that you're going to have there like an example of another charity that is going to support you in the process. I'm now going to hand over to Olivia, that is going to talk about a couple of recipes.
Yeah, so I think what we've tried to do with the recipes is write recipes like in a combination of both kind of general and organization specific detail, so that despite the context of a recipe set by a charity, you can still see how it might work in your own service or organization. So I'm going to talk you through two examples of recipes we have up live on our site at the moment. So the first is CHAYN. And CHAYN is a volunteer-run organization that provides resources for survivors of abuse in multiple countries all around the world. So there's been an increase in domestic abuse during the COVID-19 lockdown, and CHAYN wanted to reach people who may feel unsafe at home. So what's really interesting in this recipe is that it highlights considerations for the users and their needs, and specifically around safety. So like this recipe talks a lot about making it easy to access this platform at a time that suits their users on a protected platform, so that they know that they're safe. It also details how to link up using different tools and different platforms as an organization, so that onus isn't on your users to figure out. And then like the steps to implementation cover everything from designing a syllabus using existing materials to hosting weekly calls and making service improvements. And I think what's really interesting as well in service recipes is the sections about guidance and risks to consider. In these sections, the recipes, it kind of covers some more of the nuanced and relational information, which is really invaluable for services in the third sector. And I think it's really like where a lot of the value for clients is held. So CHAYN has, for example, covered in their considerations just ways to think about how you like guidance on working with those dealing with trauma. And I think kind of just building on, like they've learned a lot through the process of creating this service and implementing the service, and it's really great to see how they can share those and help others learn from what they've learned. The next example is Citizens Advice Manchester. So they had planned to launch their out of hours service in September 2020, but instead decided to go live in April, cutting the time they had to deliver the solution from months to a few weeks. So the out of hours service lets people ask advisors questions over text messages, web chat and phone. And it's been part of shifting the Citizens Advice Manchester services to kind of an online delivery, especially in response to COVID-19. So to deliver this service, Citizens Advice Manchester used a tool called Twilio. And I think what's really interesting about this is that when you're introducing a new tool, it's absolutely necessary for a service. You have to also consider how your staff's going to pick it up and what the learning curve with that's going to be. So to introduce this new tool to staff, the technical team from Citizens Advice Manchester worked with frontline advisors before the service went live to help design like a user journey that would go with it, help design something that would work for both clients and for staff. So as part of it, this recipe details how they made video tutorials when they launched the service, how they started small so they could fix issues before kind of opening it up to a wider public. And again, like in this section, you can see considerations for user needs. So they know their staff well, so they're able to work with them in figuring out how to implement this new tool and the decisions that need to be made around it. And the recipe steps cover everything from choosing the tool and finding people to adopt it, to launching a service and adapting it based on the responses you get. And I think like part of the reason we wanted to show you kind of two examples is just to highlight the real diversity that we've had. So with the recipes platform, we kind of want to cover a really quite a wide breadth of information. So we want everyone to feel like they can contribute it, from kind of small charities right up to large anchor organizations, from services with really polished products, or even just organizations trying a rough prototype and testing and learning. Like even charities who are fully digital versus charities who are just beginning their journey with kind of remote digital delivery. We want to include it all. So this kind of shows you the two different approaches from two different organizations to the challenges they're facing. One being a bit more technical with screencasting using Google Meet and Citizens Advice, versus CHAYN, who are being really open and hosting conversations and leaving space for questions. So yeah, it's been really interesting to see, and just maybe take a look and browse through the rest of them and you can see the real diversity and breadth of all the recipes.
Lovely. Thanks, Olivia. Now you've seen the platform and you've seen a couple of recipes. I want to tell you a tiny bit about how the project started. And probably the first place for me to start is to tell you a tiny bit about Catalyst, if you haven't heard about it. So Catalyst is a collaborative initiative between over 100 civic society organisations and some of the biggest funders, including DCMS, the National Lottery Community Fund, Comic Relief, Esme Fairbairn Foundation, Paul Hamlin Foundation, City Bridge Trust, and many, many more. And it's an organisation that's been incubated in CAST, and the aim is to make civic society far more resilient by improving the digital data and design capabilities and capacity within organisations and within the sector as a whole. The original stated aim was to help 40,000 charities over 5 years. Lots of people thought that was quite ambitious at the time. Because of the COVID-19 crisis, the move to digital and online delivery has been incredibly swift. And internally, we sort of joke that a 5-year mission has become a 5-month one. But what it has made us do is accelerate a few more things, which is no bad thing. And certainly the sector is moving incredibly fast, and we're so impressed with the swift move to create new services. But it also allows us more of a chance to work in the open. So crises often force you to do things that are sometimes not comfortable to do, and working in the open is one of those really important things. So why did we make the service recipes platform? Well, the strand of Catalyst that I look after is around reuse. And the reason why we think reuse is important is that it stops organizations constantly reinventing the wheel. So if you look at the charity sector at the moment, lots of the tools that are created are very bespoke tools. And as Ale said briefly in the intro, they don't necessarily need to be. Lots of organizations are responding to the same needs and expectations and behaviors of their service users as an organization. And they could be responding in a more joined up, more collaborative, more cohesive way. Reuse is also important because it helps improve the digital literacy and the digital confidence of an organization. If you're taking something that's part formed, it's far easier for you to take that through to completion than if you start with a blank sheet of paper. And one of the really important things about reuse that we need to get across is that it's not about taking something and making a carbon copy of it, making a verbatim copy. There's a very important step in this around adaptation. And Mark Earls, the social scientist, says in his book, Copy, 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 which is all about reuse, is that this adaptation step is probably the most important bit. And by adaptation in this case, we're talking about adapting it to the needs, behaviors, and expectations of your service users. And Mark gives some really good examples in his book about how copying stuff with adaptation, that mutation phase, has given rise to some of the great cultural moments of the 20th century. So he references people like David Bowie and Elvis Presley, who are great at taking existing cultural tropes and turning them into something that was somehow better and made it more accessible. And that's essentially what we want to do with these recipes. Whenever you make a recipe, you make something to a recipe. As Ali said at the start, you sometimes change it to your taste. You sometimes adapt it over time and you create your own new recipe. And we hope that these recipes that we present will be that sort of starting point. So let me tell you a tiny bit about where we got started. So we started in essence by reusing something. So this is a project about reuse, and it was only appropriate that we reuse something that was already there. So Ale and FutureGov built a pattern library, a service pattern library for local government in partnership with Essex County Council. We thought this was super interesting and wanted to work out with FutureGov how we could translate that to the charity sector, adapting it to the sort of needs of the charity sector and the slightly different environment that the charity sector is to local government. And then in response to the COVID crisis, we brought on board Snook, who've also done work around patterns, particularly in the field of mental health. And we started working together to produce this this platform which you see today, and I can take you through a brief timeline of that so you can see how quickly we've actually worked. So the project kicked off in January in the before times between CAST and FutureGov, and the first thing we did was really started to define the value proposition. And one of the people within CAST who's important is Guy Morehouse, who's a software engineer and designer, and along with Roz, who's a program manager, we sat down with Ale and we tried to map out what the service recipes platform should be for the charity sector, going right back to the value proposition and understanding who we're making it for and why they might use it. Then in March, obviously, the world started changing significantly. We decided that there was an opportunity to really accelerate things and to take the clickable prototype that Guy had made that we were just about to share with some charities and turn it into a real thing, and bring the lovely people of Snook on board to do some of the work, doing research with charities and understanding how we would make the platform a reality and how we would make the content work. And we went from onboarding Snook and deciding on this plan to actually having the first recipe live in the platform in just under a month. So that shows you the sort of the speed of work that was going on here. And since the platform went live in late April, we've been iterating continually, improving the platform, but more importantly, in some ways, improving the process in which we work with charities to publish their recipes, including some amazing work where we're now getting some charities who feel confident to do so, to actually document their own recipes. And then there's a very light touch editing phase at the end. But we're constantly trying to iterate and improve things, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But I think the pace is really great, and working in the open has really helped us to understand how to build a much better platform. And I'm now going to hand back to Ale, who's going to tell you a tiny bit about how recipes can help.
So as Chris already mentioned, what's the value of this platform? Our goal is really to help charities reuse what is out there. So don't reinvent the wheel. If something is working for another charity, try to use your time instead of trying to build exactly the same thing without speaking with other charities. Try to build on what they've been doing. The other thing that we would like to do is to help charities connect with other charities. And other charities have been facing the same challenge. Definitely has got like insights about what it takes to get the thing up and running. What are the risks that you should consider? What are the other tools that you could use, but they decided not to because maybe it doesn't work for their own context. And then, like, of course, we would like to increase the confidence of charities in trying to experiment a little bit, innovate their service delivery. And as Chris mentioned before, like this project definitely happened in the middle of COVID-19, and it's interesting to see the impact of COVID-19 on us as a team building this platform and on the value proposition of the whole platform. So it had an impact on how we work, not super like intense impact, but definitely had a minor impact because CAST is a fully remote organization. FutureGov and Snook are not. So we had to shuffle around the way we work as COVID happened to become like a fully remote team. The other thing that happened is, as I said, like it had an impact on the value proposition of the platform because we thought at the beginning we wanted to include all the recipes possible that could be interesting for other charities. But in the end, because of COVID, we decided to focus on emergency response because we understood that the benefit of a platform like this, where charities can share their own recipes and make it easier for somebody else to implement exactly the same, possibly, was extremely useful throughout a pandemic where nobody has got time or energy or money really to waste. And the other thing is that we thought recipes, at the beginning we thought they were like going to be specifically focusing on the digital solutions, but then we actually reviewed it again in the light of COVID-19 and decided that any recipe that was telling something interesting about service delivery would have been fine. The other thing we've been doing about these last 2 points is that for every recipe, we are in our database, we are collating information about if a recipe is related to COVID-19 or not, so that we are going to be able to go back to these recipes and suggest how to amend them, or we're going to take like another look at them once the pandemic is over, because we know that some of the solutions that are there on the platform are very much a result of the response to an emergency, but they might not be perfect for the future. So they're very much about acting now, but we want to be able to provide recipes that are going to actually be useful for the longer term as well. So now I'm going to hand over to Olivia to talk about the feedback we got on the recipe.
Yeah, so just jumping into where we are now. We've had lots of feedback since the beginning of this project, and I think it's come like through to us in a number of channels, so through things like Twitter and emails and through the site itself. And I think this feedback has really helped us inform our work so that the recipes are really as useful as they can be for charities. So from shaping the recipe structure right up to deciding what recipes we write things on, and understanding what challenges charities are facing. So just going to jump in and share some of that feedback with you and show how it's been useful for us. So how they've been received so far. This feedback showed us like how organizations are actually using the recipe. So using it as a place to start, so it doesn't feel like you're starting from scratch, and kind of having that recipe there as a source of reassurance for colleagues and for kind of service providers that it is something that works, and it's worked for other people in other contexts. And so there's no reason that it couldn't work for you. Another piece of feedback we got was about using recipes as a kind of a checklist. So like a checklist for areas to consider. And what was really interesting about this is that organizations kind of said it actually ends up freeing up time for them so that they can focus their energy on the people that they support and how to make it most suitable for them, because they feel like they're covering off the kind of understand what the basics are and they know what they need to consider going onto it. And then finally as well, we got some really interesting feedback, which just helped us kind of structure and adapt the format of the recipes. So like using that feedback to inform how we write things. And it was really interesting to see from responses, like now that the recipes are clearer and they're more to the point, and that people have really found using real examples of what organizations are doing helps not only like connect charities facing similar challenges, but it gives people confidence to use this and that they can use it moving forward and kind of either adapting or making new service delivery decisions. And so like this is really only the beginning of this project and the start of the platform, and we hope to keep going. So we do encourage anyone who's looking at this or using it just to give us feedback and just to let us know how it's going. But yeah, as for future plans, I'll pass you back over to Chris, who's going to discuss that.
Lovely, thanks Olivia. So what's next for what we're doing? Well, we're at the very beginning of the service. I mean, those of you who visited the site will see a little badge at the top says it's in alpha. That means that we're still unsure of some things, we're sure of other things, and we're learning as we go. It's very important to say what stage things are at, so you know how settled they are in lots of ways. Some of the things that we're really thinking about at the moment are things like trying to work out how charities are using the recipes, and to find ways of actually stating on the recipes which charities are using them, and to give some real credence and to give some thanks and some gratitude to the charities that shared them in the first place. We think there's something really important about tracking where these recipes go and how they're used, that has some quite massive implications around the desire to get organizations collaborating more and competing less. So at the moment, the charity sector tends to reinvent the wheel a lot because it's competing for things like funding or volunteers or local authority grants and things like that. And we think the recipes are part of moving that towards collaboration and getting organizations to work together. Another bit about getting organizations to work together is to think about how we package up recipes around specific themes. And in a way, sort of what we're meaning by this, because this isn't a feature that's live yet. So if you can imagine how you collate and curate music into playlists, that's the sort of thing that we're starting to think about. We're realizing that we need to be a bit more explicit about some of the underlying things around a recipe, like safety and security. They're super important, and actually by sharing that, it makes the whole ecosystem a lot more stable and a lot better at looking after service users. And finally, what you may notice as you browse around the platform, that you see a few sort of tags. So you see patterns, and increasingly you'll see things around the life events that organizations look after. So an example of a life event is receiving a diagnosis. And you'll also start to see information about the beneficiaries served. So to understand who those recipes, who the services that those recipes encode are for. So we've got a lot to do still. We're only in alpha, but we'll work in the open, and we'll work with your feedback. So how can you get involved with what we're doing? Well, first of all, we need more people, more than ever, to share recipes. We're very heartened by the fact that several charities have already said that this has saved them time, it's helped them create services quicker, it's given them more confidence. But we need more organizations to share. So if you have an idea for something that your organization is doing, please do get in touch, please share it openly. The sector will become so much better if everyone collaborates and is open about these things. And we really want this to be by charities for charities. That's the real mission of this. Secondly, if you see something that you think would make a good recipe, even if it's not in your organization, do get in touch with us. We're very good at going and gently asking people if they'd like to share. And we need to know where to go and look. And I want to sort of actually say a big thank you at the moment to a lovely person who works within Cast and Catalyst, Nissa Ramsey, who has really helped us to think about thematic areas, specifically around response, where we've then gone and found recipes that will help charities deal with the emerging and emergency situation that COVID has brought. As we said, this is a learning process, and we'd always welcome feedback on the website. If you've got an idea for new features, or if something doesn't seem clear, do get in touch with us. We're very approachable, and we're very much wanting to develop this platform in humble service of the sector. So we'd love to hear your feedback, and you can get in touch with us through the Catalyst website, or you can tweet us or email us. We're in all of those places. I'd just like to pay a quick tribute to the team that's worked on this and has worked so hard and so quickly. As we said at the start, it's a collaboration between 3 organizations, and it's been a real privilege to work in this team. Everyone has pulled together amazingly, and you really don't see the sort of like the edges between the organizations. And so in FutureGov, it's Ale. Within Cast, it's myself and Guy and Roz, with some help from Nissa. And then within Snook, it's Olivier, Meg, Juliet, Sarah, Rachel, and that's it. I was worried there I was going to miss someone out, but I don't think I have. We'd like to thank you for listening. We'd love to get you involved in the recipes process. We hope you'll use one. We hope you'll share your work with us and with the wider community. And we're now ready to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Hello everybody, and big thank you to Chris, Alessandra and Olivia for that. If you'd like to submit a question, I'll bring the panel in just a moment. You can hit the overlapping text boxes, the Q&A button on it's bottom right for me. It might be someone else on your screen. Hit that, submit a question, and we'll make sure to ask the panel. So without further ado, I'd love to bring in Alessandra and Olivia to start those questions. Oh, and Chris as well. Chris disguised himself as Alessandra. How are you all doing?
Hi.
Thank you for that. That was incredible. I was wondering why Alessandra was on twice.
Yeah, so was I, and then it turned out it was me.
Brilliant. The big reveal, it was brilliant. Thanks for that. Really appreciate it. So I want to kind of start by following on from how we finished the campaign and how we finished the presentation, sorry, in terms of looking forward. First question we have is, what's the long-term ambition for this platform?
Yeah, so I can take that one. The long-term ambition for it is really to help organizations reuse things. It's as simple as that. as we said earlier on, there are so many things that that make organisations feel they're different to each other, and that's slightly forced on them due to things like funding, competition, and things like that. But when you look deeper and deeper, you realise that lots of them do very similar things. And what we really want to do is work on ways that the knowledge can be shared, the learnings can be shared, the cost of development can potentially be shared, and that better products can be built. I think that's the aim really, is that by going through reuse, by getting organizations to work together collaboratively, we can end up building much better services for the beneficiaries of those charities. So that's the long-term ambition. It's a fairly big one, it has to be said, but there we go.
Yeah, well, they're the best ones, right? No, I think you hit something, you know, you hit a nail on the head that's close to our heart at Charity Digital, which is collaboration within the sector. For us, and I you know, I bet for you as well, it's something that isn't often done well within the charity sector, and it's certainly there's a big gap there in terms of how more charities can come together to push things like this forward, especially at times like these. So with that being said, kind of what has been the hardest and easiest or best thing about collaborating together is in the consortium that you are?
I will start on this one. So I think my biggest learning really is that when you cook something for a long time and then you onboard somebody else on the project, it gets quite tricky because you give like for granted definitions. So like later on down the line, we got to the point where for me it was very clear what we were talking about, and it wasn't so clear for Lydia or for the Snook team. So I think when you start collaborating, it's really about setting the foundations of the project, taking really the time, because like it's gonna pay back the time you give for the onboarding. So that's mine.
Yeah, I can jump in. I think as well, like one of the best things for me was just being able to include so many voices in the project was really nice, because we kind of all were coming from slightly different backgrounds with different experience and knowledge of patterns and recipes. And so just being able to be in such a nice open environment where everyone was willing to listen and share and take on board what everyone was saying, I think that was like a real testament to the team working on this. And I think as well, just being really responsive. So we had like lots of work being done, kind of feeding into this work, telling us, you know, what challenges charities were facing. And I think that just really helped us be responsive and produce recipes that were quite useful for people. And I think like what's hard about collaboration, touching on kind of following up what Ale said, is just it's hard to know what's the right amount of sharing, especially when you're remote. Like it's not as easy as, I'm sorry, I'm going to close my window.
No worries.
It's not as easy as when you're sitting in the room with someone. So knowing like, oh, are we talking about the same thing again? And are you oversharing or are you undersharing? And so getting the balance of communication right is always tricky. But I think we managed that.
Yeah, and I think the bits I'd like to say is I think, so we all had a sort of shared vision of where we wanted to get to. And the team is wonderfully egoless, which I think might be to do with it's largely led by very, very bright, brilliant women. Apart from me, although I'm obviously masquerading as one as by pretending I'm Ali in my name. But I think, you know, it's that egoless nature of the team, and the fact that everyone wants to head towards the same place is super important. So I'm incredibly proud and privileged to be part of this team, and they're all wonderful.
Amazing. Excited to see what is to come in the future. Roger has a question from us for us and the panelists. I know you're in alpha phase at the minute, so might not have a specific answer to this yet. But he asked, how much reuse are you seeing of the patterns already, and are there any examples?
Yeah, so I think that we are seeing reuse, and anything that we're seeing is just being fed back to us either through Twitter or emails or kind of just our own networks of people we know. And I think like moving forward into the next phase of this, that is going to be one of the big, I guess, challenges we tackle as a team, is like, how do we keep that feedback loop open, and how do we know how many people are using it, how many people might be remixing a recipe. So like we shared a few examples in the presentation there of how we've heard people are saying we're using it as a checklist or as a guideline, or people who are saying like it's been really helpful for us to get a basis, like a starting point for a project to change kind of how we implement a service. So like from that, we have some understanding, but I think that's definitely something we're trying to knuckle down on, is getting, like, I guess, better measurements in place around how people are using it.
And if I can jump on this, Chris, like one of the foundation of this work is really the pattern work. So the idea that all the transaction, all the services are based on a common thing that people are trying to do. For example, book something, pay for something. And we've been mapping all the, even though it's not completely like out there in the platform, because we're still trying to work out how to make it visible and usable by people. This pattern idea is the foundation of the platform. And it's very interesting coming from the public sector library and the mental health library, the SNOOC deed. It's very interesting to see the patterns are always the same. It's just that they get adapted to the context they are delivered within in a different way, of course. So in all the sectors, we're going to talk about pay for something, book for something, provide something. But of course, they're going to be translated in a different way if it's for a charity, and then even within the charity sector, depending on what is the charity actually doing, is going to be completely different. So our intent really here is to provide some level of filtering for charities so they can actually get, as I said, straightforward inspiration. I want to do exactly this thing, or let me have a look about what are all the other charities doing about providing something, so that I might get some, you know, lateral inspiration from something else that is not exactly what I wanted to do, but it's going to help you like having like the spark moment.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. And I think to answer as another question that Roger posted, we are working with the funders to try and understand how we can incentivize reuse. It's you know, we can't say where we've got to yet, but it's something that we definitely see as a thing that needs to be done, and we're taking inspiration from things that are happening in the science sector at the moment. So Wellcome Foundation are doing open research grants where they give top-up funding for people who make their research available under an open license at the point of creation. And I think we'll want to look and see if there are similar sort of ways of helping the sector through being slightly more prescriptive in a very gentle way about some of the funding.
Great, thank you all. We have a question from Jo Talbot. She's asking, is this a platform that's open to everyone? She works for a small charity. Is it something they can access?
Yeah, I can take that one. So absolutely, it's available to everyone, and we think in lots of ways, small charities can gain the most, and also can be involved in terms of supplying recipes. So you know, some of the ones that one of the ones we highlighted today from CHAYN, that's a pretty small charity. They've got a large reach and they do amazing work, but they're a very small team. Likewise, I think in terms of using the recipes, it allows small charities to be able to take a lot of work that's been created by some of the larger charities who've got more significant resource, and use that as the basis for their service delivery. And so in a way, we hope that it will in some ways level things up for smaller charities who maybe can't afford a digital team with lots of user researchers and lots of service designers and even UX designers, that they can take these things and they can create their own ones. And lots of the work that we're going to be doing over Catalyst over the next sort of year or so is really about how to operationalize some of this, how to make some of these things that are currently available as recipes even easier to get started with using, so that small charities, you know, can take advantage of the work that's been done by organizations with far more resource than themselves.
Great, thanks very much. We have another great question in from Sweta. How could the service delivery recipes be adapted to organizations that work with people who are digitally excluded?
I think that's a really interesting question. I mean, one of the things that we're trying to do in the recipes is to understand the environment and the expectations and needs of the user at the point at which the service is delivered to them. I think digital exclusion is a really tricky one, especially at the moment with COVID. And I think it's hard to know in some ways how to change this. I mean, there's some amazing work being done with devices.now and lots of the stuff from the online centres around getting devices to the digital excluded and helping them to understand how to use them. I think it's very hard to know how you would do much more than just work with those organisations at the moment. Although one thing that you could consider doing, which Gov UK has been doing really well with its Notify service, is thinking about how you make paper a delivery form. So with Gov UK Notify, you can either send a text message, or you can send an email, or you can send a letter. And letters tragically are still one of the ways that you can help people with digital exclusion really well. And so I think one of the things that we'd love to work with is organisations who are still thinking about and trying to understand how you make paper and the mail work for people who are digitally excluded. Because just ignoring the fact that they can't be involved just because they're not online or they don't have a device feels to me like a bit of a cop out in a way. It's hard, but there's the most important work is doing the hard work to make things feel simple for people.
Great, thanks for that. Just for the benefit of the audience, we do have a Be More Inclusive panel on stream 2 later on, which will cover digital exclusion in some depth as well. So would recommend checking that one out. I think we can kind of answer the next two questions in one here. We have a participant who's asking, are there any recipes for delivery of volunteer and education opportunities in the outdoors? And if not, how can people ask about recipes or solutions to requirements that haven't yet been published on the recipes list?
Yeah, so I think both questions are really good. I think about the volunteering and education opportunities in the outdoors, I think we definitely have either some, I can't remember, I don't think they've been published yet, but we definitely have some in the pipeline, so watch this space, they're coming. But I also think that's just something we're working on at the moment, is we do have a pipeline of recipes that we're just kind of waiting to polish up and get approval to publish. And I think something we're trying to work on is opening that up and sharing that with people, but also the work that we're doing is kind of, like I said, trying to be responsive. So if there's something that you feel, this is a big challenge and I haven't seen anyone doing it well, feel free to share that with us. You can do it either through the website, we have an email linked in the slides, or even just shout us out on Twitter, because I think that's the kind of stuff we're trying to gather together and realize, if there is no kind of recipe in that space, can we write one, or who can we get involved, or how can we find a way of sharing kind of understanding on that common challenge. So yes, if there's something that you'd like to see and it isn't there, let us know, and either we'll have one up and coming, or we can figure out a way to write one. So
yeah, and I think just to add to that, one of the things that we're sort of looking at the moment is how we make the sort of backlog of recipes a bit more public. There's a sensitivity to that, in that sort of the recipes aren't necessarily signed off by an organization early on in the process. It's normally towards the end. So to make the backlog public is a tiny bit tricky, but it's not completely intractable. I think it would also be good for us to have a sort of a public list of suggestions for that. And I think, as we said in the presentation, if there's something you've seen that you think should be a recipe, even if it's not from within your organization, do let us know, and we'll go and chat to that organization and see if they're happy to share. We're quite good at that sort of thing, but this is very much designed to be sort of by charities for charities. So please do, sort of help us by getting involved in the process and telling us what sort of things you need recipes on, and how you might like to use them.
Yeah, the best type of learning for sure. And the slides will be available to all those asking after the event is finished. We'll be sending those out, so you can have those resources at hand. So one final question before we move on, and it's what do you all kind of see as what does the future hold for service delivery as we sort of migrate into this new normal?
Cool. Nothing small then.
Good one to finish on, I think.
Good one to finish on. I would like to see it be more collaborative. I think both in terms of organisation sharing the platforms that they use and sharing the methodologies that they use, but also working collaboratively where other organisations are better placed to serve a beneficiary. I think, you know, we need to find ways of better referring individuals to organisations that are best equipped to do that, and to have systems in place to allow that to happen.
Yeah, and I would just jump in and say as well, like with service delivery, I think one of the things with the recipes, and that we've seen especially happening in the charity sector with kind of the lockdown and everything that's been happening, is people are being super responsive and just trying things, starting small, trying things and seeing how they work. So I think it would be really nice to see like more of that, and people not being afraid to try something new and get it wrong. And hopefully there's some recipes in there showing how charities have done that, what they've learned, and kind of everyone just helping each other in that way.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I mean, I think it's the time, in particular, like with this pandemic, really build the case for which we have to go beyond our own organization. So if there's somebody else doing the thing we wanted to do and is doing it already in a better and more efficient way, why do we need to deliver that? Can we just build partnerships for which we're actually going to do it together? It's really like building on our strengths more than on our own organization, really.
And this is a brilliant example of that. We had a tiny bit of the knowledge within CAST, but a lot of the knowledge about patterns existed within FutureGov. So we worked with them, and we realized that we needed other people who understood about patterns and were more service designers, and we got Snook involved. And what we've achieved is greater than any organization could have done individually as a result of that collaboration, and as a result of understanding where your strengths and weaknesses as an organization are, and having the psychological safety to say, you folks know this, you've got this, you do this, please. So I think more of that.
Absolutely. Be brave, be bold, be collaborative. I think, I think that wraps up. Tell our work in marketing. Thank you very much to all three of you. Great session, great Q&A. I'll let you get on with the rest of your day now, but thanks once again. It's been great to have you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you so much.